Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material, articles, research, expert notes, and, well, we synthesize it all into knowledge that you can use right away.
Exactly. Our mission today is to give you a shortcut. We're extracting the surprising, sometimes even brutal truths about what makes a creative work really compelling.
And not just that, but how you navigate all the challenges of creation, of perfection, and just getting your project out the door.
Right. We're kind of pulling back the curtain on the whole creative process. We're mixing these high-level craft secrets things like using silence and dialogue with some necessary reality checks.
Reality checks about surviving the publishing world and, maybe most importantly, defeating your own self-sabotage.
Absolutely.
So we're starting immediately with what is, I think, maybe the biggest structural decision anyone faces, whether you're writing a novel, a film, anything really. How do you decide whose story you're actually telling?
It sounds so simple, right? But it's the question that is, it's the pitfall for almost every first-time writer.
The research had this great anecdote about an author working on a novel called Uncharted, and they thought they were being clever.
Yeah, they decided on an ensemble cast. 5 college friends.
Thinking that all that complexity and breadth would make the story richer.
And that's when the expert guidance came in from Don Mass, who just delivered this core critique. He said, you have too many main characters.
Which is structurally just a killer.
It is. If you try to write 5 stories equally, you end up introducing 5 inciting incidents, 5 main goals, 5 sets of complications.
And the emotional weight of any one conflict just gets diluted by the other 4. Everything starts to feel, I guess, predictable.
Totally predictable. The reader isn't forced to invest completely in one person's fate. So the solution that the author eventually used was crucial.
Focus on one protagonist.
Just one. And the test for finding that person is to ask, which of these characters has the most to lose? Which one is going to be the most emotionally wrecked by what happens in this book?
So in the case of Uncharted, that immediately focused the story on the character Karen, the mother.
Right, because her teenage daughter was at risk. And by focusing the entire novel through Karen's specific stakes, her vulnerability, the book became, and this is a quote, 1,000 times more powerful.
More emotional, more memorable. It just clicks.
And that really is the universal rule here. If you're building a complex world, any side elements are important only to the degree that they affect your primary focus.
So if a supporting character has some dramatic subplot, but it never actually touches the protagonist.
Cut it. You have to be ruthless. It's extraneous material.
Okay, but I feel like I need to push back on that a little, because we see these huge, sweeping sagas everywhere now. I mean, what about Game of Thrones? Or a massive novel with 50 points of view?
That's a fair challenge, but even in those huge sagas, you're still following specific emotional threads tied to individual vulnerable characters. The only reason the big world-shattering events land is because of what happens to one person you care about in that moment.
So the big idea here is that the power of one protagonist is actually a way to tell the biggest stories.
It is. If you want to write about war, you don't write about the whole front. You write about one person's war. If aliens threaten the planet, you show that global problem through one family's struggle to survive, like in the movie Signs.
That single, intensely vulnerable lens makes the grand scale feel immediate and personal.
Exactly.
That really reframes the whole challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pivot from focus to engagement. Once we have the reader hooked into that one story, what keeps them on the line, turning pages? The research introduced this fascinating psychological principle, the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect. Yeah, it's basically the brain's obsession with things that are left unfinished. We are psychologically just compelled to close open loops.
Well, you need to know what happens.
We have to. And storytellers use this by doing the opposite of explaining everything up front. They just raise a question in your mind and you keep reading because you have this burning need for the answer.
The example from the novel Magdalene was perfect for this. In just a few paragraphs, the author builds this incredible curiosity.
Right. The character is in chains.
So you immediately ask, why is she in chains?
Then you learn she's not a Roman citizen, but she's on trial. So why is she on trial under Roman law?
And then they kick her. She's confessed and is ready to die. Which forces you to ask, what could be so terrible that she'd confess to it, and why on earth is she ready to die?
See how fast that tension builds? Your job is to generate questions, not to just dispense information.
But there's a key clarification here, right?
Yes. Hooking the reader is not the same as confusing the reader. You still have to understand the basic who, where, and when. We know she's a woman in chains before a Roman judge. The mystery is why she's there, not where she is.
Okay, so let's apply that same principle of tension to dialogue. Specifically, this idea of the quiet power of subtext.
Subtext. This is all the stuff characters mean but don't actually say. It's the emotion, the history, the tension that's just vibrating under the words.
And readers love it.
They crave it because it invites them to participate. They get the pleasure of decoding the emotional truth themselves. And it's how you really get to know a character. Do they deflect with humor? Do they retreat into silence?
The sources gave a really simple contrast. The on-the-nose dialogue is, "Are you mad at me? Yes, you hurt my feelings."
Right. Very direct.
But the subtext version is just, "You're quiet today." And the other character replies, "Just tired," while maybe, folding a dish towel a little too aggressively.
Exactly. We instantly sense the emotional injury, even though the words themselves are totally boring. The emotional truth shines through even when the spoken truth is a shield.
So how do you actually create that? The research laid out 3 simple techniques.
First one is body language. If a character says, "I'm perfectly happy for you," but they're twisting their ring or, rearranging the felt shakers, the reader trusts the behavior. Never the words. The friction between them is where the tension lives.
Okay, and the second technique?
Avoidance. This is just the art of sidestepping the real issue by changing the subject completely. You ask why they quit their job, and suddenly they're talking about the neighbor's new car.
They're avoiding writing the truth on the page.
That's a great way to put it. That root word scribe, meaning to write or record, is everywhere. We inscribe meaning with our words. Subtext is when the real meaning is written underneath that inscription.
But if a character is always avoiding things, don't they just become frustrating? How do you balance that with moving the story forward?
That brings us to the third technique. Speaking indirectly. When something really matters, characters will approach it sideways. They use a metaphor or a proxy.
So instead of saying, "I am scared to lose you,"
they might say something like, "You're driving pretty fast tonight," or "Maybe you don't need to work quite so late this week." The surface meaning is simple, but the emotional meaning is crystal clear to the reader.
That's really powerful craft advice. Okay, so let's make that necessary shift in perspective. We've talked about the quiet struggle of craft, but there's a whole different kind of struggle when that manuscript leaves your desk.
And meets the publishing industry.
Yeah.
The reality check.
It often comes down to a really practical question. Why do publishers send manuscripts back without even reading them?
And the simple answer is time and volume.
Just pure logistics.
Pure logistics. Publishers are just flooded with unsolicited manuscripts. They don't have time to read them. They'll read maybe a page or two of something that's been requested, like a proposal and 3 sample chapters, and they can tell almost immediately if the skill is there.
This is where resilience becomes, well, everything. We learned about Stephen Pressfield, who submitted his huge 800-page manuscript for Gates of Fire.
And they told him he had to cut 300 pages. Just brutal. And he said he fell into this deep despair over it.
But this is where that external belief comes in.
Right. The president of Viking Press sent him a handwritten note. It said, "There is a first-rate novel in here. I am confident you will pull this off." And Pressfield taped that note to his screen.
And that one note gave him the courage for the 6 months it took to make those cuts. That belief is just invaluable.
It is no matter what path you take.
And speaking of paths, if you decide to go with self-publishing, the research pointed to some great resources, like Kindlepreneur and Readsy's free courses.
But it also came with a really big caution. Don't rush into it. Polish the book, submit it to editors and agents first. The reason is simple.
Distribution.
Self-publishing doesn't get you into bookstores. If that's your goal, you have to go the traditional route.
And if you do self-publish, you have to avoid looking unprofessional. The sources listed 4 dead giveaways that just scream amateur hour.
The first 2 are all about paper and page mechanics. First, wrong color paper. Nonfiction is often on cream. A novel should be on white. It's a subtle but immediate visual cue.
And second, bad formatting, like having blank lines between paragraphs that aren't indented.
That's a huge mistake. It blows up your page count, which increases the printing cost, which increases the price of your book.
So it's a mistake that actually costs you money. The other 2 are about the cover, the exterior.
Right. Third, your cover image has to reflect the genre. A thriller cover needs to look like a thriller cover, not a romance. And fourth, using a non-standard size. Most novels are 5.5 by 8.5 inches.
Deviating from that just signals you don't know the industry standard.
Exactly. The goal is for the book to look like art, to look professional. And we got some great tips for cover design.
What were they?
3 critical things. 1, circular design. The layout should move the reader's eye around the cover in a loop, from the title to the image to the author's name, not just stacked up and down.
It gives it energy.
It does. 2. Typography. Use no more than 2 contrasting fonts. If one is really ornate, the other has to be super simple and clean.
And 3, it was layers.
Layers. A great cover has depth. You need at least 3 visible layers. A background color, an image that fits the genre, and then the text, which has to be sharp and legible. These little mechanical fixes make a huge difference.
Okay, that brings us to our final segment,
Mm-hmm.
the creative mindset. The research detailed, 10 ways writers derail themselves? Let's just distill those down to actions.
Right, let's focus on the fixes. The first one is huge. Habit over inspiration. You have to stop waiting for the muse to show up.
Because she's not coming.
She is not coming. Or if she does, it's because you already did the work. You have to create a steady habit, even just 15 minutes a day. Consistency is what invites inspiration.
Okay, second, momentum over perfection. That endless cycle of revising the first chapter 20 times.
It's just procrastination in a fancy suit.
Yeah.
You have to give yourself permission for the first draft to stink. Just push forward and finish it. You can only revise wisely once you can see the whole shape of the thing.
The first draft is just mapping the terrain. And third,
Treat setbacks as stepping stones. They aren't evidence of failure, they're evidence of effort. The research talked about writers who had to completely rewrite contracted manuscripts because the first version was too intellectual or too dark. That struggle made the final product better.
and finally, and this connects back to Pressfield's note, this philosophy of embracing the unexpected idea, the take the dare philosophy.
Yes. I mean, think about Lin-Manuel Miranda's idea for a hip-hop show about Alexander Hamilton. On paper, that sounds ridiculous.
Totally.
Yeah.
But when he pitched it to his mentor, Stephen Sondheim, Sondheim laughed, but then affirmed it. He said it was amazing, precisely because, quote, no one will expect that from you.
And that little bit of validation was enough to power him through 3 years of writing.
It reminds me of the story from the sources about the author who had an idea to teach an animal to talk and testify about God. And her husband called it the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
Oof, that's brutal. But we've all had those ideas, right? The ones that sound absurd until you realize they have real heart. In that case, that dumb idea became the novel Unspoken and a beloved character, Seema the gorilla.
You have to accept the challenge of the unexpected idea, which I think connects perfectly to these quiet gifts the research mentions. Gifts for any deeply observant person.
Yeah, we can call them the holy gifts, the gift of seeing what other people overlook, that flicker of emotion, the slant of light.
And the gift of feeling. Sensitivity, which we often see as a flaw, is reframed here as a responsibility. You feel intensely so you can speak into the hurting places of the world.
And finally, the gift of pondering, of holding ideas in your heart, turning them over, just sitting with questions that other people rush past.
That really reframes the whole process. It's not just labor. It's a form of deep observation. And it connects perfectly back to that E.L. Doctorow quote about writing.
Oh, the driving at night quote.
Exactly. He said it's like driving a car at night.
Yeah.
You never see further than your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way.
So here's our final thought for you to take with you, to apply to your biggest goal right now. What if you stopped worrying about the second or third step, that distant destination? What if you just focused on the ground right beneath your feet, the first bird or the first brick? How much pressure does that remove? Start, close in.
You can make the whole trip that way. A great point. Before we go, let's close out with 2 quick terms for your back pocket. The French word denouement.
Pronounced denouement. It's the final part of a story where all the loose ends get tied up.
And the phrase auld lang syne.
Auld lang syne. It literally means old, long since. But really, it's about raising a toast to the good old days and old friends.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into craft, courage, and that unspoken tension. We'll see you next time.